Hey everyone, thank you for joining us for another Modern Sales Power Hour. I am super excited to have with us today the illustrious Brett Queener. Brett, can you say hi to everybody?
Hello, everyone.
We'll introduce him more here in a second, but you guys are in for a hell of a treat here today because Brett is the OG modern seller, the OG selling operational excellence guru. And so I'm really excited to have him here today to shoot the shit with and talk about answer your kind of most important questions. But while people are trickling in here, I thought I might ask you, Brett, you have any big plans this weekend? I think you said that you're going to be going to the ranch. Are you going to be doing some maintenance there? What's the deal? What's the haves this weekend?
Well, first it starts with the Niners game. So it was interesting
Yeah,
though.
are we gonna win?
Absolutely. But I asked my wife, like, what do you think about me going to the game? It was not like as the word was coming out, I realized it was a dumb question. So
What do you think? And like her face changed, and you're like, "Oh, get those words back."
my wife did not grow up in a family with sports at all. So she just doesn't understand. She says to me, I don't understand. You watch these teams every game all year, and it's a very small chance you're going to be happy in the end. Why the hell do you do this? So it's kind of hard to explain. So we got the Niners game, and then
Love it.
yeah, we'll visit some wineries. Do what we do.
That's kind of, it's like old school, right? Little Home Depot, a little Bed Bath and Beyond. If there's time.
Maybe review some companies' sales processes and try to help them figure out how to be more intentional. Product led doesn't mean just demo the product and show up and throw up. Turns out you might buy.
No. Product led means the product sells itself, doesn't it? Yeah, that's what that means. So while folks are joining here today, if you want to get familiar with the Zoom interface here, we ask for robust audience participation. That's one of the big things with Power Hour. We're not here to just blow smoke. We're here to answer your questions as pertinent. We have questions that have been submitted ahead of time, but also your questions here live. So use the chat panel, the Q&A panel, etc. For folks who are in the chat right now, just let us know where you're coming from, what city you're at, etc. And for folks that aren't familiar, Power Hour is hosted by Modern Sales Pros. So MSP is the world's largest revenue leadership community for those in sales management, sales and revenue operations, sales development, and the related and supporting disciplines. And the community's mission is to create an environment for our 30,000 members and growing to answer questions that they would struggle to solve on their own and help them see around corners that they may not know about. And so the way that we do that is through really great live sessions. Like one would be an example of what you're about to experience. We have a robust online forum as well, and in the near future, in-person events. Although we did have an in-person event in San Francisco, it was absolutely delightful at the Anina bar on their patio. It was quite nice. And so for those of you who weren't previously admitted, you should now have access to the community. If you don't, don't hesitate to drop a note to our team at modernsaleshq.com. So just before we get started, a couple of reminders here. Power Hour is in a unique format. There's not a specific piece of content that we're talking through. Rather, we're picking the brain of whatever revenue leader we have live, or in our case, a retired revenue leader who now is an investor. And then, remember, you're here to learn. This is all about Q&A, so please ask your questions, use the chat, etc. So with that, let's do some introductions here. I'll make mine super quick. I'm Pete Kazanjy. I'm the founder of MSP. I'm also the co-founder and CRO of Atrium. We make delightful data-driven sales management software that helps AEC, SDR, CS managers use metrics and data to improve rep and team performance. But while that's cute about me, I think I'm way more excited about having Brett here to join us. So Brett, you want to introduce yourself and kind of what you spend your time doing right now, but more importantly, kind of what makes you authoritative for folks to listen to here.
Did you say I'm retired? Do you feel like the conversations you and I have talking about sales makes me retired?
I just like to give you shit.
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
it's definitely personal training.
So
Brett is a yeah, he's the personal trainer version of an investor, especially a B2B SaaS investor. He's quite delightful.
all right, what I do now as I'm a general partner of Bonfire, we are a weird VC firm in that we add a shit ton of value. I have a fun marketing and messaging.
This is true.
I'm trying to do, which is how do you message that you add value when most don't? And people like to dunk on VCs, because you can't really take credit. So it's actually the hardest sales positioning exercise I'm working on. But
fair enough.
All we do is we're on our third fund, get about $500 million under assets. We just do seed stage, we just do B2B, and we usually lead and are on the board. And we are not a high volume investor. Our last fund was $100 million. It's probably 20 core bets. And we tend to invest when companies are 5 to 10 employees, some revenue, hopefully some good product, but it's kind of a hope and an audacious dream. That's what we do. And prior to that, I was talking to Hannah. Hannah was like, she's in San Diego now. And, I actually got into VC because in 2017, I chucked the Bay after being there for 25 years and moved to San Diego. So I was like, what job could I do where I could live in Santa Barbara? Turns out venture might be one of them. But prior to Bonfire, I spent a lot of time in SaaS. So I was employee sub 100 at Salesforce. We had like 14 reps at the time. There were like 7 new business, 7 add-on. We had 1 product, 4 tabs, no dashboards, no APIs, and I was the first field operations person that existed in SaaS. And so it really was, what is this go-to-market model? And what's funny is before Salesforce, it was a company called Siebel Systems, which was the fastest growing company in its respective decade. I couldn't pick 2 dramatically different companies in terms of cultures and customer success. When I was leaving Siebel, I was going to get out of software because I'd actually started my last honest job. I managed a factory before I went to business school for a nuclear medical imaging company based in Milpitas. And when you use the word OG, part of O is old. Back in the day in the Bay, you could live in the marina or wherever you wanted, but you commuted to like Sunnyvale or Milpitas because that's where the action was. The only jobs in San Francisco.
And back then it only took 30 minutes because there's no traffic.
It took forever because that's where all the traffic was. Like, it was horrible. I managed a factory and we won the Malcolm Baldrige Award, did Kanban and all this kind of stuff in process. And when I was at Siebel, I basically realized, well, I'm a process person. Like I'm a process and narrative person. And prior to Salesforce, I was like, you don't really need process. Like back then, either like you were down market, no one bought on the web, you sold through a channel at Fry's, or you did like, I'm going to see a sucker 15 people theme music, with the sales rep, enterprise sales rep, and you fly around trying to close deals.
Right.
I remember seeing TJ Rogers from Cypress Semiconductor speak, and he said, son, in a speech in your career, he's like, you either make shit or you sell shit. And if you do anything else in a company, you're bullshit. And I thought that like, oh, that's me. But what was very interesting about Salesforce was, with SaaS, you could run a lot of very interesting experiments. But if you could package the right product to the right buyer with the right sales approach and the right packaging, you might be able to sell direct every segment of a market. And that was the thesis. So I spent 12 years at Salesforce, including running operations. Then we had the inmate run the asylum. I ran all of products. And when I ran products, we had 1 product in SFA, no service cloud, no marketing cloud, no analytics cloud, no platform, no app exchange. And we had 40 developers. The whole thing was written in PL SQL. And we had 3 front-end engineers is when I took over product. And then I ran some BUs. And then after Salesforce, I thought that perhaps I was a fraud and I should join a pre-revenue company. And I did that with Spark. Pre-revenue was going to be freemium, never going to have reps. And completely pivoted to global enterprise focus. That company is now worth a couple $2 billion. So that's my background. I spend a lot of time on intersection of go-to-market and selling.
Yeah, and I think so. So Brett is an investor, board member on a number of MSP member companies. Speckit, actually, Melanie was the keynote of our recent SCO or Mega SCO. I think Brett is also an investor in Turiel. Also an investor in Atrium and on the board of Atrium as well. So definitely is tied in very closely with the MSP community. Wonderful. So again, folks, feel free to ask questions, your Q&A and what have you. I'll kind of start with one that was kind of presented earlier, and then and I think what we can do here is remove screen share. So Brett, obviously you think I forgot about the factory thing, because a modern sales organization is just a revenue factory. Yep. Right? It's a process, multi-stage process, et cetera, et cetera. But most modern sales organizations are not run by factory operations people who think in those terms, and are into data-driven instrumentation and things like that. And so when you look at the companies that you're involved in, also Brett is an early investor in and also a board member at Pendo. So it's not just small companies. He's been involved in large companies as well that have grown. Where do you see the biggest sales management performance gap in the companies that you work with, and what are the common reasons why organizations underperform, and what are the ways to solve that?
Yeah,
small question.
No. I think this is interestingly, it depends on what scale and size you're dealing with it. So totally. In my mind, look, from seed to A is, let's kind of get one motion working. I don't know, let's get to $1 million, $2 million of revenue. Can we get a team and an integrated motion to go work after one buyer, et cetera? Yeah, something. And then scale up. And then, so when I think about the challenges I'll do two phases. Let's call it get to our first couple of million of revenue. Then I'll talk about going to a couple million to call it 10, 25, and then. Yep. So the earlier you are, the biggest challenge I see as a sales leader is not really understanding your narrative. And so what I mean by a narrative, there are two things. One is, as a company, look, there's a lot of people raising money now. We want to throw AEs and SDRs at stuff, et cetera. I just chuckle at the time when, I end up with a sales leader and it's like, I thought I did a good job, but I'm moving on to the next company. And I'm like, what? Did you guys raise a Series A at $40 million and you had a 4X goal? And all of a sudden you hired 9 reps and everybody's sad because you haven't hit quota? Like, yeah, that's what happened. How did you know? I'm like, well, because it fucking happens all the time. So for me, early on is really nailing down who you're selling to, why they actually care about your product, and really inspect it and get out of features. And really what I ask them to do is, what is it your product allows them to do that they cannot do today? And if you
superpowers, right?
If you can't communicate that quickly, you're kind of screwed. And there's kind of two dimensions when I look from a sales process perspective. I'm a big fan of framing. If you really think about all of sales methodology and sales training and et cetera, what are we trying to do? And then if you do discovery and you're amazing at discovery, you're not like, how much budget do you have? But you're a master of it, where you've asked the discovery question for which, if they say yes, you've got them, right?
You're revealing to them, elucidating, opening their eyes.
It's what I call the battle of the frame. Can we get the buyer in our frame? And competitors try to come in with their frame, and you want to make sure your frame is strong enough that they can't unlock that. I was chuckling the other day with the product marketing interview candidate where I said, walk me through how you handle competitive materials. It was a good conversation. Bad competitive materials is, I'm up at your competitor Y, and you give the tear sheet to the reps, which is like, their product sucks here, we're good here. I'm like, well, how the hell is a rep supposed to have that conversation? You should be giving to the rep oh, based on the frame, what we told you what to discover, and this is why we are uniquely differentiated, only tell me stuff vis-a-vis the competition within that, because I could have a conversation. But back to the specific question, because I do digress, which is, if you are creating a category, when I talk to companies, I ask them to define, and when you're talking to buyers, why should they invest in this? Why should they invest in you? And why they should invest now?
Why change? Why you? Why now?
And what's interesting is, if you're creating a new category, you need to really think about why this. It's less important about your features, why you, et cetera. They don't understand why this.
Because there's not a line item, right? There's not a line item in the budget.
I have two recent investments. Churn is one of them. The other way, it's very exciting. They've never bought this before, and so what I say is they don't know how to buy your product. So you need to be a lot more intentional around how you're sort of bringing light to the cave and get them to buy in, and then shut up and then get them to buy that. Whereas if you're replacing a category, you need to get differentiation much earlier. And
that's like smart recruiters. Like Turiel is like, hey, we've never had this thing. We like hack it together. Atrium is that as well, right? It's like, hey, we've never had something that's purpose made for data-driven sales management. We've tried to like hack together a bunch of dashboards and Tableau and whatever, and everyone fucking hates it, but like that's the way that we do it. Versus, hey, here's an ATS. Your current ATS sucks. This is the reason why this new ATS is way better.
Let's use Atrium as a great example, right? Congrats on the Series A this week, right?
Thanks. Congrats to your LPs.
Yes. Well, we'll see. I joined. You know what my ownership of the company is vis-a-vis my contribution. So I don't know if the LPs are paying attention yet. But if you
take you out to dinner.
If you think about your early success, it was a replacement play. Oh, dashboard suck or Inside Square sucks, and you don't have a lot of help, and we're here to help you. And if you look at a lot of the recent momentum, as you guys have really been doing a great job of saying, look, there is this thing called data-driven sales management.
You ought to do it. You ought to do it.
Sales managers' jobs actually suck. And we kind of believe that if you're a good sales manager, your rep productivity might be higher. And people are like, well, I guess that makes sense. So it's very interesting that you are, as you're getting larger, you're sort of evolving on that frame. That's sort of the thing I see early on. Like, have you gotten your motion right? 1 to 15 or 20 is we don't know how to scale. Right? I have a first-time leader. I had a couple reps and SDRs, but we don't really know how to bring in the leadership and bring in the repeatability and bring in the process. And
measure it and what have you.
Or good sales leaders, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, first sales, look, at early stage companies, sometimes you get lucky and you get a VP of sales that's, scaled companies to a high end who join, but it's kind of a pain in the ass. Like if you've been doing that and you got to come in and hire and write the scripts for the SDR, you got to be sort of a special spirit animal to do that. So how do you scale the team, and how do you get your first segmentation right? Right at Salesforce, what did we do? We segmented. It was always a great conversation. Hey, Mr. VP, I know you came in to run the Americas, but now you run the West. Oh, I'm not going to reach my career goals. Oh, I know you came into here, but you're running SMB. Oh, no, oh my God, I'm not going to reach my career goals. You have to have this sort of conversation like, no, you don't understand. This is about divide and conquer. And so I think the next thing where I see is people, in terms of looking at the math or the numbers, if you start to sell to more than one type of customer, I was on a call today with a company that has a product-led motion and an outbound motion. And they were showing me their close rate number. And I was like, you're giving me a close rate that's blended across a bunch of product stuff. I'm like, or a pipe gen number. Do you have pipe coverage? I was like, well, I can't tell. You tell me you don't have pipe. If you're enterprise, yeah, you need 3X. But if you're telling me you have a 10-day sales cycle and inbound, we got to rethink about pipe coverage because we can't walk into quarter with pipe coverage because it's all created. So getting that segment.
Are these guys going to, you sold them Atrium, right? It sounds like all these questions can be instantly answered within 90 seconds.
No, I don't have a
value-added investor.
No,
Jesus Christ.
Not yet. So really getting that initial segmentation, right? And then as you get larger, the big thing I think people struggle with is, okay, so we've gotten to $5-10 million in revenue. What gets interesting there, the number that's as interesting as ARR growth is NRR, right?
Right.
Because if your sales team is, you're building a sales team and you always have to hunt for new business, that's a slog. That is a slog. So you should assume that you're able to upsell or grow your customers. And so the interesting question I see there often is people mess that up and they expose that complexity. Like, oh, I'm going to sell this product to a different buyer. I'm like, well, I don't know. We've been selling to this buyer. Now you got another buyer. Oh, it's a completely different conversation. Are you
That sounds calorically intensive.
Well, you're just like, well, the stupidest thing is, yeah, I'm going to use the same rep. Oh, really? You've had this rep who's become the masters of marketing and SDR, working with this customer, getting in their head, and you're going to go tell them to do that? That's a smart.
They're really good at speaking French, and now you're going to ask them to speak German? I don't know, man.
That's like taking a named account rep, like, and saying, hey, go mind the MQLs, right? Like, no. Don't. So look, those are the blend of challenges that I generally see.
We had cool. So as usual, a lot of interesting comments and kind of like digressions and what have you in there. I'm going to grab onto a couple as related to some questions here. So we actually have a question from Ross Rich. He's the founder of Accord, and as related to kind of like PLG stuff. We were kind of mentioning earlier, how do you think about the future of sales with the rise of PLG? Obviously, kind of pretty broad question there, but at least like, what are you seeing are kind of the most important? Actually, let's like break it out two ways. One, where are you seeing like new companies that are like leveraging it appropriately? And then also, how are you seeing organizations that haven't historically had a PLG motion adding, like leveraging more product in order to help them, sell more effectively?
Yeah, broad question. I have a lot of thoughts on this. Let me tell you, things are true. And often people think of product led as like, oh, we could be like Slack, or like, so I think I like to look product led at a meta level first. One thing is this is what is never going to work again. Go to your website, don't know what your product is, fill out a lead form, schedule a time with an SDR. You could insert Calendly, but apparently Twitter is unhappy with Calendly, whatever. Get that meeting set up at the SDR.
It was some whiny VC whining about being whatever.
He clearly has an EA. Anyways,
yeah.
So I like VimCal, just so you know. SDR does some qualification questions, and then we've done methodology and Barrow's training where we're going to make sure we extract more for the customer until we give them the right to look at the product. You get an AE on the call. They hopefully listen to the SDR's questions. They can't show the fucking product. And then finally, the SE shows up and nobody from the AE or SDR passes shit to the SE and he's giving a canned demo. Like, that's done. Like, that's just never going to happen again.
That was the Siebel sales motion, right?
Well, that's because if your product sucks, you're trying to hide it. That was
right. So that's going away.
That's actually how responses actually had a good exit. They purposely didn't show the product, right? They pulled out of the death spiral. So what is true, regardless of whether you're freemium, have a free trial, et cetera, is you need to expose what your product just does to give context to the buyer.
Clearer communication up front.
Just what is it? Don't waste my fucking time. What does your product do? What becomes interesting is if the buyer can see kind of what your product does, then when you actually get into a conversation, you could actually have a more advanced, thoughtful thing. Hey, saw you looked at the product, generally with their customers, these are the three things they're trying to solve, which of it, like you can quickly sort of.
What resonated in there versus like throwing darts in the dark during disco, where like you give them some framing. And I think this is what's pretty cool is like there's an emerging category of software. Like PLG is cool, and like God bless OpenView for like coming up with branding it.
Their content is very good. I'm a little bit jealous. I mean, Kyle and team.
Oh, it is quite good. Yeah. Well, then Kyle went over to Lessonly and like did the same thing there. I'm a big fan of marketers who like animals. They have they have Ollie the llama over there. But like, I think the interesting thing there is like PLG is. Yes, you went to a meta level and said like, what is the goal of PLG?
I'll bring it down to a micro level, but look,
but it's fine. But what it is just like, look, you're solving a problem which is elucidating to the prospect, hey, here's the pain, here's the problem that we solve, and like giving them a little bit of a view into how that's solved. Now that can go all the way to user utility in the form of like actual product, in the form of like if you have a light use case like Slack or Zoom or whatever, but that's a lot of engineering investment, right? Like, and like engineers are like, oh yeah, they're really super cheap, right? And I think this is where things like Turiel and Reprise and things like that are really interesting, because like you can achieve the goal that you were just talking about, Brett, about like show them why this potentially matters, show them the vision of the future, but you can potentially do it at a much lower cost than like throwing, you know, millions and millions of dollars at like engineering expense in order to build that
Yeah, like
product.
the simplest way, I've made 2 investments in product led. I'm going to call it product led. I call it go to market tech. I made an investment in Turiel, which
Yep.
is if you go to a website, you drive all this traffic to the website and you expect people to, there's 2 CTAs on a website, contact me, sign up for demo. And then if they don't do that, we do some stupid scoring methodology, open 3 white papers, the rest of them, and it's okay to ping them. But we haven't given them any context to what your product does. And so crazy idea, if you could actually let people on your website know what your product does, you know what? You might actually get more lead converts, or the lead converts you get could be more qualified. I don't know if any customer, any company on the call has free trials or freemium, you know that 50% of them are friggin' looky-loos. They're just trying to figure out, what does this do? It's not a buyer intent. And then I have another one, which I've invested recently, a company called Demolead. We haven't announced it yet, which is, if you think about the sales process, and HubSpot has this for Salesforce, we all see this: do discovery call, blah, 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 do demo. Like the demo is one event. Like somewhere we did it once. And the reality, what is a demo? A demo is a product conversation. And why is it we don't think from a sales process or a consideration process? Well, should there be a couple demos? And what is a demo?
Right.
A demo is us trying to understand what their needs are and map and get them comfortable for a product. So in my mind, and so what, instead of doing all the automation of demos, I still believe people like to talk to humans. You know, I have one company I invested in that has a product-led motion on the low end, and they're like, you know, it's surprising on the upper end, they really do want to talk to salespeople. I'm like, yeah, because they haven't bought this before. They tend to be a conservative buyer. They kind of want to trust you. And so what Demoleap does is, we believe humans should give demos.
Yeah, in the complicated decision tree of like not humans shouldn't give harbor tour demos. Over here we've got Coit Tower. Over here we have the Golden Gate Bridge. It should be like, hey, I heard this and this from you. Let's get right into that right here, right?
So, and then if I really think about product led, like pure product led, then we figure out primarily, like, where did product led start? It started with Pendo and the others, which is you've deployed, you've sold this thing. Are people using your product, right? And back then, before Pendo started, like I ran product at Salesforce, designers would give me these amazing walkthroughs that were going to make their scope. And then what would happen was when we moved from waterfall to sprint, well, they didn't move and it all got cut. So we released half-baked features that we got up the stage and announced that no one knew how to fuck to use. So product led was like, hey, people are in our product. Is there a way to allow them to use the product quicker? And then it was like, okay, for those type of products where we have a very good trial in and a good convert, then we're really investing in, you know, oh, the walkthroughs and the conversion moments and et cetera. And then, you know, because males don't like to be called marketers, they call themselves growth hackers or whatever, but like, whatever, you're in there, right? So when I look at product led in that venue, what I'm just trying to figure out is, in my mind, what we're doing is we are putting people on top of the funnel in our product. They're not opportunities yet. And we just have a lot better data. Like, instead of trying to figure out, did they open my outreach email or my sales loft ping, I can see if they're doing something in the product. And in that way, you know, I think about that. And then the question is, to think through is, when they buy, is it so obvious, like self-serve credit card? In my mind, what I remind people is, if your product has utility to an individual first, you know, and then to a team, fine. But like somebody,
scratch pad, etc.
Yeah, somebody's going to swipe a credit card on behalf of 15 to 20 people, maybe. And then I think the biggest issue that we're all thinking through is, in product led, at least on the lower end of first buy, what's the right amount of sales assist? And what
Yeah.
did we call people before that were SDRs or reps if you're doing, but I look at it really as an assisted purchase. So that's what I think about it. But everybody wants to be product led and they all
I
want to
think,
be
yeah,
the rest of it.
it's like this binary term, and I think the way that like you describe it is right, which is it's more about like just take the whole funnel and think about like smoothing it using technology, right? And so one mechanism by which you can do that is with your own engineering stuff, right? And of course, like I think where this showed up, of course, was like open source software and dev tools did this first because like the software could be pretty janky and it can have sharp edges because engineers actually like they could figure it out and maybe they kind of like it a little bit that it's kind of like hard to use around the edges. And like that's not the truth with like most business users. So instead of it being like this binary thing of like, cool, it's self-serve or cool, it's not self-serve. Well, like there's a lot of use cases where if you want to make it like Atrium is a good example of this. If you want to make Atrium like fully self-serve, and actually you roast us a bunch about this, like that's gonna be a lot of engineering investment in order to get there. And so like maybe you can raise that amount of capital in order to get there if you're this good looking and persuasive, but oftentimes that's not the case, right? And so then if then it's a question of like not every use case can have that. So then are there other ways of doing that with tutorials or some sort of like demo thing or whatever, or a lightweight version of that and so on and so forth. So
Yeah, but I
yeah,
mean,
I think that
the interesting thing is that there's a weird notion that if you're product led, you don't have salespeople. And we
oh yeah,
have
that's just not nonsense.
like Figma, Notion, these companies are amazingly product led where they build some addiction, if you will, at a group of people, and there's usage, and then there's the right opportunity to go sell them. But Slack has a very large sales
Well,
team, right?
they do, and like you might make the argument that they, the good news was that like their board showed up and slapped them around after Stuart Butterfield was like, oh yeah, we're just going to self-serve forever, and they're just like, cool, so those words need to go back in your mouth because we're not going to let you become Dropbox and squander this opportunity. And you might make the argument that like the Salesforce acquisition might have been a little bit as a result of like being behind the eight ball for 2 years. Now, I mean, don't get me wrong, Slack is a very, very successful organization, but I think that like the good news is the antipathy of like product founders or engineering founders to like and misperception around like what sales does and why it's useful. I think that's on the wane, and I think in large part thanks to like some really good evangelists in the market, like this guy who wrote the book on early stage sales. But I think that like that's going away. And
Did you read the tweet from Reinhardt on Segment, which was awesome? Did you read that?
oh, we're like, yeah, the one I think I deleted my tweet where I quote tweeted him. I'm like, what happens when an engineering founder like discovers discovery? Where he was like, he's like, oh my God, it was so amazing. I didn't show, like my sales guy was like showing up and asking questions and asking provocative questions and like, as opposed to just showing up and telling him all about the product. And I was like, oh goodness gracious me, yes. But I think that was just like an education gap, and I think that that's changing. I want to change gears a little bit here because you were talking about this as relates to both the earliest. I mean, it's actually really fascinating. The earliest instantiations of product-led growth were not about like pre-transaction, was post-transaction. Like, oh my God, we just sold you a bunch of Salesforce. We just sold you a bunch of, exact target. We just, and like now you got to use it. The dog's got to eat the dog food or else they're going to churn. And we only got them on a 2-year contract. We better hustle or else they might churn. Right. I think that's a really fascinating thing that most people don't appreciate, which is why we have old fogies on the show in order to kind of unpack this for us. What are the most important things now in post sale in order to drive low churn? How do you kind of see that? Because I think that like obviously NRR is super important, and investors are really pumped up about that. And you can't grow a company if you have a leaky bucket. Where are the biggest things that you see that are most important to drive low churn?
Look, I'm a weird investor in many ways, as you would say. You're like, do you?
True.
In that from seed to A, the org I think about building out of the gate and having most professional is the success org.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're young and early, the product isn't what it needs to be. The sales team's just taking down revenue. We haven't nailed like, this is the ICP. Don't sell to that customer. We're like, whatever, it's 10K. I can take it. Right?
They wanted to buy. They had a pulse.
So the most important thing is like a well thought through customer success process with people that know what they're doing. I've written on this extensively, which is like, duh, when somebody buys your product, what does it take to onboard them? Once they're onboarded, okay, what does it take for them to become more sticky? And then once they're more sticky, how do we renew them and sell them more? And then the other part is when shit goes awry, and this is the thing I see all the time, like 2 out of 5 calls, I'll be on a call and I'll be like, hey, do you have a separate support org? What do you mean support? Everyone's support. No, like the number email they call to log tickets, and their job is to get those resolved within the SLAs, and they hammer on engineering or on tech debt and the rest of it. Oh no, everybody in success is support, and everybody's running around and they're mad at the product team and they're mad at the sales team. Like, it's not hard. Build out an org, a thoughtful process that makes sure you understand how the baton's being passed. And then second, when you're like, oh, I sell to different types of customers. Oh, it looks like I got some large customers and some small customers. Well, turns out you can't throw a bunch of bodies at small customers. So how are you going to introduce some level of automation scale in that process? It's where Pendo comes in a lot, right? And then I think the second question that comes around driving, that's retention, right? And if you have a product, and when I look at NRR, it comes 2 things. Like the NRR, same product. Either you do a land and expand, okay? I'd sell to these users and I add 30, same product, or you have a product that's growth driven. It's usage based. Oh, there's more usage.
Yeah, like Datadog or New Relic or like Checker or something like that. More background checks, more server hosts, etc.
Like Atrium, you guys will go in and
more teams. Oh, the AE team, the SDR team, the CS team.
Right. Or I eventually, when you get larger, I've got a second product, right? Sure. You sell the add-on, et cetera. I think people get really wrapped around the axle about like, how do we make that happen? Let's go hire a separate account management team, and let's hire the mythical unicorn that's really good at success and selling, which I get at low-end transactional businesses makes sense, but I see people kind of mess that up sort of every time.
Yeah, I think the things that what we end up seeing it's really important from a success standpoint is the handoff is really important. We actually have a thing called the handoff dossier. It's French because it's fancy, right? Yeah. And I think in case folks didn't hear earlier, Brett's kind of a fan of narratives and like why someone bought. So what you need to understand is like it goes all the way through alignment, right? So like, hey, these are the 6 things. These are these 6 things that people like to buy us for. The problems that we saw. Oh, I actually like number 2, number 3, and number 6. Awesome. We're gonna like, cool. We're gonna prove value. We're gonna get to a transaction, et cetera, et cetera. Then when we go over to success, hey, they bought because they wanted the broccoli beef, right? They wanted the General Tso's chicken. They wanted the chicken chow mein. Let's go, right? So do that, all right? Deliver on that. So like, that needs to be handed off. Oh, cool. I see you ordered this. Wonderful. We're gonna get you successful on that. And you only have the certain amount of attention. You don't have like, it's a little bit of like a macabre metaphor that I like to use here, but there's this concept in battlefield medicine called like the golden hour. Like you have an hour to get somebody to a field hospital. After that, like it's not going to be a good outcome. And so I think you have a certain amount of attention to like drive that initial success there. And you should think about your success motion in that regard. Like what are the early wins right? And I guess it's like PLG in that regard. Like, what are the early micro wins where you can start getting the person like, oh yeah, this does taste good. Yeah, okay, you've earned my attention for that much longer, irrespective of the fact like, oh, we have a 2-year contract. We're like, well, no, you got a 2-year contract and they paid for it, but like your attention from the manager like only has a certain amount of time. So like really making sure that you nail that, and then you can't just like be done because it's like,
No,
oh, cool. Wonderful. I see that you really enjoyed the broccoli beef and the chow mein and the General Tso's chicken. We also have a special here tonight. And I'm
yeah,
going to, I would recommend it to you because other customers like you who like broccoli beef and General Tso's chicken, they really like this other thing too.
yeah.
And we're
Well,
going
then,
to do that.
and then where the magic happens is when your success and what you do in success really helps on the sales front. You and I have had this conversation. It was a conversation I had with Pendo, Atrium, and many customers. When you start getting above a couple million, what do we do for a reference call? You show them the most advanced company that's just kicking ass with data-driven sales management or product-led. But you're talking to a prospect that like is still in their diapers. And you're like, oh, look at this candidate with the PhD. Meanwhile, Johnny's peeing in the corner. And so the reality is what I try to get people through is, what is the methodology? Like, we're always pitching something. Oh, if you use our product, at some point you'll be like this. But you need to walk them through, hey, you're here. We're going to get you from, kindergarten, elementary. And then when you're from elementary, we'll get you into middle school, et cetera. And so really, because one of the issues about why people don't buy, even if they're like, I really like this and I have a budget, and they're like, well, it's not urgency. What people miss about that urgency is that they are not comfortable. They can't see the outcome that will happen that you told them would happen if they bought your product. Either you've done a shitty job of helping them visualize the outcome. They just don't believe that they on their own can do it. So how is your successor going to help move this customer along? And if you nail that, I promise you, you will have compression on sales cycle rates. And then what you'll be really clever to do if you're high-end sellers is, instead of talking about like the paperwork and procurement, you'll be like, look, let's visualize the world where this is what's happened, and we can work back from there. Here's how we're going to work with you on that. So, Mr. Customer, help me get this thing bought so I can get you that outcome. And really bucketing your customers, because every customer is not the same. Some are sophisticated, some are unsophisticated. Some have advanced goals, some have simple goals. And you need to map that towards the end of your sales process and the success team. So that's one that I try to explain to people. It takes a little while because you got to have something behind it. But then it's good, because let's say you're evaluating your customer health. Are they red, yellow, green? Or I'm looking at DAU, MAU. Are they going to renew? And then like, what would we do? Well, it would be good to know our customer base if they fall in, A, B, C, or D maturity type, and therefore are there metrics that should be, and then this is the playbook we would go run. So you can bring in my mind, the science and some level of repeatability success that you do to sales.
Yeah, I think a lot of the time, at least, especially in early stage scenarios, like the Harry Potter sorting hat sort of situation is great if you're a little bit more sophisticated. I think the other thing that's, it's sometimes like you just got to know which direction to push in. And so just make it like this is especially the case with new categories where people don't have the existing motion of like, oh, I hire people, like, of course I'm going to put them in the ATS because I swapped in your ATS for my ATS, versus, oh, I've never managed a sales team with data before. You have the customer success function has to behave more like a personal trainer than like a waiter. And they have to be like, cool, the reason why you signed up for this is because of XYZ. Also, when you grow up, you want to be like this, right? You want to be a VP of sales when you grow up, don't you? Oh, you do? Okay, and I know that you're an SDR manager right now, but if you want to be a VP of sales when you grow up, you need to learn how to manage by metric. I get that it's a little bit uncomfortable, right? And like, numbers give you the hives, but we're going to get you there. We're going to get you successful, right?
So it's our maturity model, so they can achieve their maturity model. And that only works, but you and I as older become less mature, so it sort of doesn't apply to us.
Right. And so, but I think that's the first thing. And it's like, you got to act like a personal trainer. But then the other thing too, is that you got to have your customer success folks need to know what what the small set of behaviors are that you're going to be constantly driving. Like in the case of Atrium, one of the, you can't just be like usage. It's like, no. What are the actual things that they need to do? And so like in Atrium's case, you ask any of our customer success people, they're like, look, a successful user has multiple views that they're consuming across an operating rhythm, and it's being broadcast to them via email and via Slack. And so like those are leading indicators. If you have that set up, right? So if you have a play deployed with them to like track the ramp of their SDRs or track the ramp of their AEs or track their enterprise AE prospecting, if you have that playbook deployed with those views being broadcast, usage is going to come. It's going to come.
What's funny is usage might come, but the ultimate answer at Atrium, when you know you've got them, is, hey, are they using this as part of their conversations with the reps?
Exactly. And like obviously then like woven into their operating rhythm. But the important thing is like so then the CSM needs to know, oh, all things being equal, like more views being broadcast. Got it. Like all things being equal up until, we call it saturation, up until a saturation level. And so you can have like a really complicated like playbook or like sorting hat or what have you, but like just giving the person, like AEs know this. At the end of the day, what do? You have more meetings with more people in the account and you close the deal. And in the case of the customer success is like, how do you gain yardage? So give them an understanding of what the gaining the yardage is, as opposed to like what the score is, which is like usage or the renewal, of course, which is a lag. The one thing I want,
at Salesforce, there was one data point that if we got to, we knew they were renewed. What do you think it was?
what's that?
What do you think it was?
Oh, God. I was gonna say putting data into the CRM, but like you put a bunch of data in the CRM and like ignore it and not use it. Running the forecast out of it.
2 API integrations.
Yeah, there you go. I buy that. Oh, because it were like 2 API integrations piping in or reading out, or like both.
Didn't matter. I mean, think about it today. Like, how do I say? People don't rip Salesforce out, because that means that all of the other apps, all the other, yeah. So
yeah, they go splat. Yeah, and the same. I mean, this is I work with one of the early Datadog leaders as like a PLG coach for me. And early on, they were like, oh yeah, once they had 6 dashboards that were being broadcast to them, the DevOps people were like happier than pigs and shit, right? Like they wouldn't go anywhere, right? So essentially, it's just like, so what is that? Like if you're Turiel, it's like, hey man, we're gonna get you lit up with like an MVP Turiel, and we're gonna get that bad boy on the homepage, and then you're just gonna be like, oh my God, this is amazing. I'm never gonna make this thing move. And like, so you have to think about what that leading indicator is, and let me make sure the CSMs know that. And it's like, cool, this person, like this deal is not closed until they are deployed in this capacity. And then we want a second Turiel, I want a third Turiel, we want like, a second view, or we want a third view, or what have you. Last kind of question here, since we have we have about 10 minutes left here. Owen had an interesting question about like, what is the impact of the Great Resignation going to have on company performance and future direction there? I mean, I think that like, I'm not 100% clear on the quote unquote Great Resignation. I think it's maybe a little bit more along the lines of that what you had was a bunch of people during kind of like the booga period of COVID. We're like, okay, I'm not going to have my natural attrition where I look for other things. I'm just going to freeze and amber for 6 months or 9 months, and then of course like that all had to release at some point. So essentially you had like a supply chain backup of people changing roles. But I think that organizations really are especially in a remote environment, are appreciating how like, they have to be way better managers, and they can't, and like, management by walking around doesn't really work, especially in a remote environment. You got to be more proactive about those things, and that can be things like, I do this all the time. I'm obsessive about like just like jumping between Slack DM channels and being like, hey, what's up, good morning, hey, how's it going, high five. et cetera, but also doing that with data as well, so you can kind of get ahead of things. What have you been seeing on, how like remote work and also the Great Resignation is impacting performance, Brett?
I've been thinking about this a lot. I've read a great article. It was at the Atlantic. And what it was talking about was COVID's impact on America's obsession with hustle culture.
Mhm.
And remember, I've got a kid at Stanford who studies like Europe, and he's left of Che, and he chuckles at, when people in the US are asking for, I don't know, 35-hour work weeks or child leave or the rest of it. And he always chuckles like, oh, it's communist and socialism. And he's like, these are all laws in Germany. Like in Europe, these are all laws. And it compares how much Europeans work versus Americans work. And historically, we would laugh, oh, the Europeans don't fucking work hard, da 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 da, they're silly, haha. America, we dominate. And that was probably true up until about COVID. And I think what COVID made people kind of recognize, like, oh, wait a second, I don't have to live in this shitty apartment in a place I can live where I want, and I can work when I want. I think it's made the generation of workers that predominantly we will have to hire really say, like, why am I doing this job?
Yeah.
Which is tough. Like when everybody at Salesforce writes about, oh, the predictable revenue or the Salesforce model, you're like, dudes, we could pay people $50K a year to work 80 hours a week selling a sales product to salespeople who like to be sold to. I'm not sure that recipe applies to the entire SaaS economy. Like it was a unique moment. And we were replacing a piece of software that was like the worst fucking piece of software of all time, right? So like, so I think what it means is,
Careful, Tom Siebel might be listening. He's got better things to do.
There's no love lost there. Sorry.
Shocker.
I think it means, I think it means that as a manager, one, predominantly your employees are going to be remote. I mean, there may be pockets where you have an inside sales team, you have SDRs where if they're younger in their craft, you do want them in small hubs because there's nothing better than repeating than that. But for me, it comes down, like the best business book that I recommend is the book Drive. And
Daniel Pink.
Yeah, and I was given this because at one point I was managing like R&D, including developers. And they were like, and they thought I was like, oh, Beelzebub, here comes this guy. He's horrible.
Totally.
And the book Drive says, why do we work? And it starts out this interesting story where in Sweden, people would donate blood, but they needed more blood. So they started paying people to donate blood. And blood donations dropped 80%.
It went down, right?
People don't give blood for money. That wasn't the intrinsic motivation.
Right.
So what I think about Daniel Pink is it's a very simple concept, and it's true about employees. It's true about managing employees. I think it's more true than ever is why are people fired up? Like, what do we try to do here? We talk about work-life balance, but we all are very bad at it. We're type A. We make poor life choices, and in sales, we want to hire people that are highly ambitious that also will make poor life choices and just work all day. Like, we know that, but we don't expect it of you. And so what I think with the Great Resignation, I don't think it's a Great Resignation. I think just people are kind of like,
it's the Harry Potter thing. It's a resorting.
Yeah, I think it is a resorting, and I think it's like, should I go do that?
What do I care?
Now, and hopefully you can't go like, like all the people in my life, like hairdressers and dog groomers disappeared. Like, dude, I invested in Solana. I'm out. I'm like, okay, good for you. But assuming that isn't there anymore, people are motivated for 4 reasons. 1, am I getting better at my craft? So am I learning and getting better? 2, if I get better at my craft, humans have a need for self-direction and autonomy. Will they delegate and trust me more? So those are interesting. Those are needed.
Right.
But the question is what I'm doing impactful at this company? And is this company impactful? And I think as managers and the rest of it, and sales managers, you're going to have to keep reminding people, just like you try to remain prospects around, the why, what, and when. You have to do that for your employees. Now, I think the hardest part is that can't also go with, I want to get promoted in 3 months. Like, you don't get to like not work as hard,
Have both.
have better work-life balance, and want to be the VP of pictures in 30 days. Remember that millennial skit?
No, I think, yeah, it's like, I think there's definitely a sorting, and there's definitely a sorting that's going on there. And I think what you just have to be, it's hiring, like we do this with Atrium sales organizations. Like we have this really cool value proposition for account executives. You're like, hey, you're going to come work at Atrium. We are the sales excellence company. You're going to sell a product that is going to, the method by which you sell the product is going to make you better at data-driven sales management, because you will have to be expert at data-driven sales management. By the way, you will be networking with sales leaders all day long, and your feedback will be extraordinarily important to the product organization, because Atrium is the first and best user of Atrium. That's very compelling to account executives. So there is a sell there to that prospect, right? To that candidate. And so just like you were talking about, like being very clear about, this is what we do with our tutorial, right? Mr. Ms. prospect or whatever. This is our value proposition. I think you have to do the same thing with your candidates and be clear about it. Or like, I'll use Atrium as an example. Like I think Atrium had a little bit of a kind of like a, cultural mismatch, confusion about like what do we want to be when we grow up at the beginning of like, early 2020, what have you. And of course, COVID kind of like messed with that a little bit more. But like, we are an operational excellence culture. That is what we do. We can't be loosey-goosey, lackadaisical, whatever, because it's antithetical to how our product works. And also, you also can't do that in an early stage organization. What's that?
I spent a lot of time with you guys. You guys got to stop grinding so hard. Yes.
But hold on a second. Yes and no. I think what we have to. So no, the organization is very operational excellent. The feedback there is that we have to have leverage in our operational excellence, and leverage and that means making that promise to our employees and our prospects. Say, you're going to come to Atrium, we're going to have very high standards for you, right? We're going to teach you how to do these things. There's going to be great documentation. We're going to give you great software. We're going to give you great hardware. We're going to support the hell out of you, but we're going to have high expectations for you. And it was actually really funny. We have this team called the go-to-market operations team. It's absolutely fantastic. It's transformed how we run our business. And we have this and it's like an entry-level role. It's not sales ops. It's more like baby biz ops. And it's like this onboarding where people are going to be able to like filter into the other parts of the organization. We actually describe the role and the job posting, and we describe the interview process, where it's like, hey, you're going to do this, and this. And I literally got this nasty gram from this person where they like emailed into me. They took the time to find my email address. It was amazing. And they're like, hey, I just want to let you know I'm not applying to this job because this interview process sounds absolutely abysmal and like, and hostile. And I hope you like, and I hope you never hire anybody. I was like, and I forwarded it to the team. I'm like, that's amazing. We've had other candidates who are like, this is the most amazing hiring process because I was able to demonstrate how awesome I am. And it made me I was excited that I know that other people in the organization have gone through this filtration process as well. And so I think it's really important to represent what your value proposition is, because then people are aligned. They're like, hey, I'm here to be on the Yankees, versus like, hey, I'm actually here to be in Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. And like, there are some organizations where it's okay to be in Mr. Rogers' neighborhood, but those are definitely not early stage companies. And so I think like people are just realizing that sorting and ideally doing a better job of like, doing that sorting at the top of the funnel. So I think we're out of time here, Brett. This was absolutely delightful. I really appreciate you taking the time. I'm sure everybody got their fill of Bretticisms for sure. Folks, if you are an early stage founder, or early stage founders that do B2B, Brett is a absolutely fantastic early stage investor. He'll come in. It's called the Queener Power Wash. Come in, clean you off, get you going in the right direction. It's not exactly a glow up. It's more like a 6-inch radial grinder, et cetera. But he's absolutely fantastic investor and super, super, super impactful impactful operator. You guys should definitely follow him on Twitter and LinkedIn. Probably more LinkedIn. It's more work appropriate. On Twitter, you're kind of more obnoxious. But Brett, thank you for coming. Next week, we're going to have Mike Marg, another sales leader turned retired investor he's actually at Craft Ventures. He was previously at Dropbox as a sales leader at Slack and Clearbit. He's absolutely fantastic. So please join us next Friday. And Brett, have an awesome weekend at the ranch, okay?
I will. See everyone.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Take care.
For those with January closes, good luck on Monday.
Oh yeah, later.